Broadcasting from the Civic Cypher Studios, welcome to the QR Code, where we share perspective, seek understanding, and shape outcomes. The man you are about to hear from is a man who every so often will jump on a quick flight and surprise us all here in the studio. He is the Q in the QR Code. He goes by the name of Q Ward.
The voice you just heard is trying aggressively to send me back into the same type of spiral that almost killed me on a Louisiana highway several years ago. He is the R in the QR Code. He goes by the name Ramses Ja.
That's me. We need you to stay tuned a little later on in the show. We are talking about Afro Man. Don't know if you remember Afro Man, but he had that song, Because I Got High.
That was the question and the affirmation of the song simultaneously.
Yeah, it was a stoner anthem right there. Well, anyway, he got sued by a police department after he made a song about them really harassing him, right? So that's been making headlines lately. We're going to cover that. We're going to have some dialogue. What is the career highlight you're most proud of? I'm pretty excited to hear what you got to say, Q. Q-Bar's clapback. Admit the mistake or admit the system is broken. Sounds like we're coming down to an ultimatum here. For Better Do Better, Florida fails to pass legislation preventing marriage of cousins. But yeah, that's definitely Better Do Better, because Florida ends up in that.
Florida be tripping.
Yeah, a lot.
Like, for real.
Yeah. But today we're going to talk about that development. We're going to share our opinions prior to that. Because of Trump, U.S. allies continue to turn to China. We had a little bit of that conversation in the past couple of weeks. Looks like there's been some recent developments. So we're going to cover that. And then we're kicking off the show talking about what many people are talking about in the culture. Cesar Chavez's legacy is in question after serious allegations arise about him. So all that and so much more to stay tuned for on this episode of the QR Code. But right now, and as always, it is time for a feel-good feature. We got some ebony excellence in store for you. Today we're sharing from Black Enterprise. Known as one of her sharpest dissents, the Supreme Court stood behind Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson by blocking the Trump administration from revoking temporary protected status, or TPS, for more than 350,000 Haitian and Syrian immigrants, Slate reports. Without any dissents, the highest court in the land is allowing immigrants from those nations to continue living and working in the U.S. legally, while it reviews the administration's arguments that it has the power to strip protections overnight. So without any emergency ruling, all 9 justices will decide, including full briefings, oral arguments, deliberation, and an opinion, over inserting the shadow docket with minimal explanation. The first Black woman justice should feel vindicated after fighting for this cause for the last 10 months, supporting hundreds of thousands of law-abiding non-citizens who will stay protected from deportation temporarily. Brown Jackson has stood with immigrants against the treatment from her fellow justices who have sided with President Donald Trump, who abruptly interrupted the legal status of TPS immigrants, sometimes standing alone. In one of her dissents, she condemned the conservative majority for its grave misuse of the shadow docket as a privilege toward the bald assertion of unconstrained executive power over countless families' pleas for the stability our government has promised them. She then encouraged her colleagues to resolve this dispute through the ordinary process, all while maintaining the status quo for immigrants rather than issuing another snap judgment to please the Trump administration. So whenever we get a chance to highlight her, obviously we take advantage of it. She's a great leader of our time, a great woman of our time, and we're very proud of her. Her being the lone voice on the Supreme Court and then getting all of them corralled and getting them to acknowledge that they kind of fell short of the mark, that feels very special and it feels very good. Hence the feel good feature and the ebony excellence. All right, let's move on. I don't know if you've been paying as much attention to this as me, but Cesar Chavez's legacy is in question after serious allegations. So I'll tell you, you and I, we have a friend. His name is Dave. I won't say the rest of his name. But, well, I guess I can. Dave Miranda, Mr. Miranda, for those that are into music. I saw him post something, and he seemed like heartbroken about, Cesar Chavez. And I'd heard some headlines in the past maybe couple of days, but I never really got into it until I saw his reaction, because there's so much like noise online that you don't really pay attention to you can't pay attention to everything. And when you see Cesar Chavez's name 3-4 times, and then you see someone that you know and that you care about, and their reaction is sort of like they're devastated, then it kind of prompts you to look into it. So this is kind of what wrote me in. And then I realized that this is really what's happening center stage for a lot of communities that you and I find ourselves kind of advocating for and are a part of. And indeed, these communities that have supported this man for the past however many decades are related to us. So I'll share, for those that don't know the story, this from kmph.com. News about Cesar Chavez continues to come out, and it's shining a very sad light on the American labor leader and civil rights activist. On Tuesday, the Cesar Chavez Foundation said it has learned of disturbing allegations that labor leader Cesar Chavez engaged in inappropriate sexual behavior with women and minors during his time as president of the United Farm Workers of America. Quote, "We are deeply shocked and saddened by what we are hearing," unquote, the foundation said. Then on Wednesday, civil rights leader Dolores Huerta issued the following statement. Okay, I'm going to read this statement from her as she wrote it. Okay, so quote, "I'm nearly 96 years old, and for the last 60 years have kept a secret because I believed that exposing the truth would hurt the farm worker movement I have spent my entire life fighting for. I have encouraged people to always use their voice. Following the New York Times multi-year investigation into sexual misconduct by Cesar Chavez, I can no longer stay silent and must share my own experiences. As a young mother in the 1960s, I experienced 2 separate sexual encounters with Cesar. The first time I was manipulated and pressured into having sex with him, and I didn't feel I could say no because he was someone that I admired, my boss and the leader of the movement I had already devoted years of my life to. The second time I was forced against my will and in an environment where I felt trapped," unquote. She goes on to say, "I had experienced abuse and sexual violence before, and I convinced myself these were incidents that I had to endure alone and in secret. Both sexual encounters with Cesar led to pregnancies. I chose to keep my pregnancies secret, and after the children were born, I arranged them to be raised by other families that could give them stable lives." So, again, I'm from California and Arizona, and Cesar Chavez is a hero, has been a hero my whole life, longer than my life. So obviously these are very disturbing allegations. This is a heartbreaking thing to discover about someone whose name is on every 5th building, you know, that you live in, and the streets are named after him, and there's parades, and you know, this man is celebrated year after year. So much of my childhood is tied to learning about him and what he fought for, and learning about the conditions that the farm workers had to endure prior to his, you know, taking center stage and advocating for these folks. And of course, we've seen in recent years a lot of men that were very much celebrated figures. Their past crimes, if we're being honest, come to light, and then taint their legacy is probably too light of a way of describing it.
Not really.
Okay.
Because all of it starts at believing victims, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you believe the story as told, then legacy tainted is light work. If that's all that happens,
yeah, well, I'm saying we should say something more. Yeah.
Well, so yeah, but the issue with things like this is Cesar Chavez, I believe, died 30-something years ago.
Okay.
Believe victims.
Mm-hmm.
When we say believe victims, we mean don't dismiss victims on their face.
Yeah.
Don't put them in a space where they can't be credible and you won't believe them no matter what.
Sure.
That does not mean believe them no matter what.
Yeah.
And in this case, there's no counter discussion.
Yeah, he's not able
because
to say
the alleged perpetrator is dead.
Right.
He can't defend himself. He can't give us any, like. So just like we will not place her in some box and all the really uncomfortable talking points that people use. Why did you wait until now? Well, maybe because she was traumatized. Maybe, like, I hate when people's position is dismissed so readily like that. Mm-hmm. Well, how come you didn't say it then? How come all these questions that do nothing to take away from what this person is alleging happened?
Sure.
But the other person not having a say at all is also unfair. as much as we can believe what happened from her point of view, there being no other point of view makes it hard for a person's legacy to just crumble per this person's story.
Okay, that's fair. With some of the other folks, though, when in describing what has happened to their legacies, that to say that their legacy has been tainted, I think would be an understatement. In particular, I'm thinking of people like Harvey Weinstein, who is a person I would not have known his name prior to that. Now, when I think of Harvey Weinstein, the only thing I think of is that he's a sexual predator.
Yeah, he's come synonymous with it in a way that even if you think of the other thing first, you then go to him.
Him immediately, yeah. Jeffrey Epstein's obviously is another person who I didn't know before. But, Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby was such a big character in my life, in my childhood. He was the dad on TV. He was that was the show that we could all watch. Even if you went to church and whatever, Bill Cosby was a TV show that you could watch that wasn't on TBS, right? For those that grew up like super Christian like I did. And then now when I think of Bill Cosby, of course, his legacy it's almost overshadowed by the fact that he's now known for putting things in people's drinks and doing all kind of weirdo stuff like that. So one of the things that I have noticed, though, in kind of looking into this even further, is a lot of people have been like covering up his statues. People are like making moves to rename buildings. Obviously, even the Farm Workers Association that he founded, they're trying to figure out where they go from here, and that's a big deal for them.
There's a very interesting thing happening here, and I think it's important to call out both. As ready as I was to say, one person's perspective overshadowing a person's entire legacy might be heavy-handed or unfair, I also appreciate that this person was not so big that no matter what he does, people will never turn their backs on him.
Yes.
Because sometimes you can do something that's so foul that people should say, okay, never mind.
Yes, go ahead.
So I'm glad that people didn't slip into the cult of Cesar Chavez, where there's nothing, he's unimpeachable. There's nothing you can say about him that'll make me change how I feel.
Okay.
Even though we don't have enough information, you and I, to make that choice, I'm just glad that this person was not so far beyond reproach that no matter what, we just gonna ride for him, because that's dangerous.
So watch this. One of the things, obviously, from where I sit, you're implying that, hey, people have made several credible allegations toward the sitting president of the United States. And there's a group of people that no matter what they say, no matter what he's accused of, no matter what he's proven guilty of, they will still ride with him. But one of the things that I will say, that at least in this moment, you're looking at two men who are listening to two men who are I would say we tend to vote more Democrat than Republican, that's me and Q. And when people say Democrats are whatever, whatever it is you say, we will also hold people that are progressive thinkers and leaders accountable. We didn't bury the story about Cesar Chavez. We didn't bury the story about Bill Clinton. If somebody does something, or it's in the headlines and it needs to be discussed, and these, whatever, we're having these public conversations, we do it with our whole chest. And that's something that we've seen sort of the opposite of on the right, where they dismiss things on their faces and they pretend like there's nothing credible there. And that is the cult-like behavior. So as much as it pains me to have a very challenging conversation today about Cesar Chavez and his legacy, because he was among the great heroes of my childhood growing up, learning about him and his role in history, he's not beyond.
Really not just of your childhood, of your life.
Yeah.
You learned about this story almost in real time.
Yeah.
So until almost now. So there's still some reconciling that we have to do as we learn more about this, and as it gets colored in a little bit more for us.
Absolutely. All right, opinions. Okay. Because of Trump, U.S. allies continue to turn to China. All right, so I'm going to share a bit from Politico. The 21st century is more likely to belong to Beijing than to Washington. At least that's the view from four key U.S. allies. Swaths of the public in Canada, Germany, France, and the UK have soured on the U.S., driven by President Donald Trump's foreign policy decisions, according to recent results from Politico. from the Political poll. Respondents in these countries increasingly see China as a more dependable partner than the U.S. and believe the Asian economic colossus is leading on advanced technologies, including artificial intelligence. You know what? They're not wrong. Critically, Europeans surveyed see it as possible to reduce reliance on the U.S., but harder to reduce reliance on China, suggesting newfound entanglements that could drastically tip the balance of global power away from the West. Here are 5 key takeaways from the poll highlighting the pivot from the U.S. to China. All right, this is from the Political poll. In partnership with the U.K., polling firm Public First found that respondents in those 4 allied countries believe it is better to depend on China than the U.S. following Trump's turbulent return to office. That appears to be driven by Trump's disruption, not only by a newfound stability in China. In a follow-up question, a majority of respondents in both Canada and Germany agreed that any attempts to get closer to China are because the U.S. has become harder to depend on, not because China itself has become a more reliable partner. In other words, we're the ones souring the relationship. So it doesn't matter what China is doing and where they're advancing and blah, blah, blah. That's just gravy for these folks. We're the ones actively straining our relationships with them, okay?
That we is doing a lot of work.
Well, this country, we, us. That's the we. That's really
you just
Donald
said
Trump.
we. Yeah, I must say you just said we and us again, and that we and that us are doing a lot of work. There's somebody very, very particularly involved.
You're right.
And that's sabotagery.
Yes, sir. All right. Okay, let's go on. Many respondents in France, 38%, and the UK, 42%, also shared that sentiment. Beijing has seized the moment to cultivate better business ties with European countries, looking for an alternative to high U.S. tariffs on their exports. Last October, Beijing hosted a forum aimed at shoring up mutual investments with Europe. More recently, senior Chinese officials described EU-China ties as a partnership rather than a rivalry. So what we see here is China capitalizing on the Trump phenomenon. And one of the things that I remember seeing when Donald Trump was first elected, and he was talking crazy about China, and the arrogance of that man. Average Americans, the people that would vote for him because they just vote Republican and that's the end of the story, I guess, and they don't really kind of look behind the curtain at all. But they're well-intentioned, well-meaning folks, I'm sure. But they just vote Republican because, they think Jesus would be a Republican, I guess. Those people perhaps would not consider what Donald Trump says and does to be offensive on a national stage, right? They think Donald Trump is a strong man kind of protecting U.S. interest. That's probably what they voted for. Indeed, we've seen a lot of defectors because of this war in Iran saying they got duped, because this is definitely not an America First war. We had no reason to go over there. We already had Iran in a decades-long figure 4 leg lock, and for some reason we're over there fighting them again. But there was an interview with, I believe it was like a high-ranking official in China, if I'm not mistaken. This was a while ago, but I remember seeing this. And this Chinese official, he was being interviewed, and they were asking him, like, so do you feel concerned about Donald Trump's position on China? Do you feel worried that the strained relationship is going to cause some form of economic collapse or hardships or whatever? And on and on and on, like the military, all these sorts of things. And they were trying to peg this guy, and the way I remember it. And his response was, the Chinese Empire has been here for 5,000 years. And it was such a powerful statement. He's like, we're good. In short, he's like, y'all are over there tripping.
And he's had a lot more to say about their economic advancement over the last 100 years, over the last 50 years, over the last 20 years. It's compelling. Yes. It'll make you press pause on everything for a second.
Because we think we got everything over here is because we don't travel. Now, those of us, people like me and Q, who do travel, we know better.
We also know there's a couple countries that own a lot of our debt. China being one of them. The other one, you could probably guess, because we seem to be making decisions on their behalf these days about what conflicts we want to get involved in and things like that. But I digress.
Now, I worry that the people that have this sort of American exceptionalism mentality are, well, I guess it's not really a worry. My belief, I should say, is that these people are the reason that we lose status on the world stage, and then we lose opportunities, and when we become poorer and weaker relative to the other global superpowers. And while historically, in all of our lifetimes, the United States has been kind of at the center of the conversation, and we've exported our culture to the rest of the world. That has caused a sense of comfort here, stateside, where we can turn our nose up and look down at foreigners around the world. It doesn't matter where they're from. We can think of them as being backwards, right? We can make fun of them, that sort of thing. Now, because y'all elected this dude, these people are stepping away from the United States, stepping to China, and, they're stepping to each other, right? But they're abandoning American businesses, they're abandoning American dependence. And again, that weakens our standing on the global stage. And then we matter less, we export less of our culture. Ultimately, we end up importing culture and influence from external sources. And I still worry that it's those people that never get into the weeds, that never ask secondary or tertiary questions about their vote, about whether or not Jesus would be a Republican or whatever. I wonder if those people at some point in the future will look back and realize, oh my God, I contributed to this.
Good luck on that one, because I can tell you now that the answer is no. We've seen too many people in the face of. There's always something, and this is a bit of my personal story as well, that you auto-correct to.
Me.
Just human.
Okay.
Me and you doing something, we could be as distracted or as angry, even if we were mad at each other and we were about to fight. But if something happened to Adonaiah or Grayson or Aiko in the middle of us being enraged with each other, you about to hit me over the head with something. If something happened to my daughter, your auto thing would click in. You would disengage from whatever we got going on and go take care of my baby. Yeah. You and I have seen parents where that's not the case because of this dude. We watched a video of a mom and dad tell their son and daughter, if that man sent somebody to shoot you, then it must be the right thing to do because he said so. We've never seen anything like this before. So the idea that the economy would one day make these people say, oh man, maybe we made the wrong choice. Yeah, right. I had somebody recently in a rebuttal to, again, something happening to my family say, well, the stock market is up. That was their real response. Somebody who I thought really cared about me. So we're paying attention. Yeah. We see all these things that feel obvious and would make us say something like, maybe now as the world turns their back on us, people will say, my bad, not a shot.
I always thought that was kind of a weak point to make, that the stock market is up. I mean, I guess if you are heavily invested in the stock market,
this person don't own no stocks.
That's
not a $5 share of nothing, and that was still their position, because it's just talking points. What's the thing that my favorite pundit says in response to us backing this repugnant person? Oh, that's what they said on Fox yesterday, so that's what I say when I encounter people in the real world.
Well, to me, that's like saying, hey, well, the guy that lives in that big mansion across town, he made a little bit more money, so we up. So it doesn't make any sense. Like, stocks are, it's a very small amount of people that can afford to invest in stocks and do indeed invest in stocks and all that stuff. So that is sure one measure. I will see that, but it's not the greatest measure of the health of a society. And it's not the most complete, far from the most complete measure of the health of the economic health of a society. So, all right, let's move on. Better do better. All right, Florida fails to pass legislation preventing marriage of cousins.
What?
Hey, we here, man. It's just, hey, shout out to Florida. I know we're on the radio in Florida, and we're on a few stations in Florida, so we try not to make fun of Florida, but well, I mean, y'all get it.
I mean,
you understand.
Again, this is not a conversation about every person in Florida.
Yeah.
This is a conversation about those who are in charge.
Yeah.
On a policy level of the state of Florida.
Amen.
And those people deserve to be made fun of.
Let's get
because when Florida comes up on our show,
it's almost never good.
It's always like, why don't they just sit down?
Sit down. All right, well, let's get to it. All right, this is from WFLA.com. The Florida bill to ban marrying a first cousin failed to pass in the Florida Senate.
That's your mother's sister's son, by the way, ma'am. That's your mother's sister's son that the law is not going to tell you that you can't marry.
Oh, well, like I said, we're here.
Your father's brother's oldest daughter. Yes, the pretty one. You're gross, sir.
Oh, you should have seen the comments. All right, legislators, that's what I meant to say, failed to pass HB 733, which stated that after July 1st, 2026, incestuous marriage would not be recognized for any purpose in the state of Florida. The bill stated that a man may not marry any woman to whom he is related by lineal consanguinity, I think that's how I say that, or his sister, aunt, or niece. A woman cannot marry a man with whom she is related by lineal consanguinity, her brother, uncle, or nephew. Florida is one of about 16 states where marrying your first cousin is legal. So that's 16. So there's 15 other states. But most of the United States has banned such marriages. Okay, so one of the things that I always thought was that there were these old-timey laws that you could, get married to a 14-year-old if, there was parental consent or there's stuff from the frontier days. You hear about these stories, but they're from a lifetime ago, 2 lifetimes ago, right? And you look back and you're like, okay, there were a bunch of weirdos, but maybe that's what life was like on the frontier. There were no bachelors, there were no brides, there's nothing going on. There's sparsely populated, who knows, man? They were giving out free land to white people only. And people were trying to populate and move west and who knows, man? I don't know what was going on back then. But you kind of write it off, you excuse it, like, okay, that was the weird laws back in the day. You hear about these states in the South where, again, they got these backwards, like backwater laws, and they were just on the books. So, it's just technically legal because no one has bothered to change the law, right? So, places like that. This story, the reason why this is so icky is because they actually some people introduced this legislation to try to change that and modernize the law. Now that's a very important thing for you to point out, because as you said, once upon a time, I'm sure there was just no law in place because everybody was trying to figure out everything. Sure, yeah.
Somebody looked and said, hey, there's no law in place that says we shouldn't do this. We should put a law in place that says we shouldn't do this. Yeah. And a bunch of people was like, nah, dog.
I need them cousins,
dog. My brother's daughter is fine, bro. Yo. Because it says specifically first cousins. So this is not one of them cousins you ain't never met that you don't even know you're related to, that you bumped into in the world and learned y'all was relatives years after y'all was seeing each other. No. Every family reunion, every holiday, every weekend, graduation, spending the night at your cousin's house.
Let's get married.
And y'all spending the night doing some wild debauchery. That's your daddy's brother's daughter, sir. Oof. That's your mother's sister's son, ma'am.
And in Florida, it's all good in the hood. Well, there's a reason that we have this segment, Better Do Better, so we can call out things like this. And I don't know that this means much to folks who don't live in Florida. I don't know that this means much to people who don't plan on marrying their cousins. But I think that in a general sense, understanding that Florida, I mean, I haven't actually done the research, so I want to get in front of that beforehand, make sure I say this plainly. I haven't done the research. But I would bet comfortably that this was a Republican majority in the Deep South that voted against this legislation. And I think that tells us where we are as a country. And knowing where we are helps us orient ourselves, I think, that's a starting point. It helps us orient ourselves toward a way to get out of this predicament. And I think that's worth considering. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more after this.